Okay, hello all you crazy people out there. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games, and welcome back to Data Structures in GameMaker. Today we're going to talk about DS maps. This is probably going to be on the short side. In the past year or so, maps have quickly been moving towards obsolescence as far as GameMaker features go. And I'll talk more about that in due time, but first, what are DS maps? So if you're anything like me, the first time you heard of DS maps in GameMaker, you probably thought of something that looked like this, or this, or this, or I don't know, this. When we talk about maps with regards to data structures, we don't mean the word map in the same sense as documenting physical space, as much as we mean the word map in the sense of mapping one value onto another. Some other programming languages might have different names for these. If you come from a background in a language like Python or C#, you probably heard of the word dictionary before, which is honestly probably a more helpful name because you can look up a value in a dictionary and see its definition or some other value associated with it. You might have also heard the more academic-sounding term associative array. So for the purposes of this video, I suppose I will run with the example of a real-world dictionary. And in this video, we're going to be mapping definitions onto words. And we can start by saying, we can start by creating a DS map. We can say we can say map equals DS map create, the same way that we create some of the other data structures. And further down, to destroy it when we're done with it, when we don't need it anymore, we can say ds map destroy map, again just like the other ones. And to if we want to insert a value into the map, into the dictionary, we could say ds map add. I'm going to be using the word dictionary and map interchangeably in this video for the most part, by the way, but we can say ds map add to the map that we created. We can add a word. Let's pick a word. Boy, this is small print. I hope my camera can zoom in on it properly. Chocolate sounds like a fun word. So if we wanted to add the word chocolate and its definition to the DS map, we could say DS map add. The key is going to be the word chocolate, and the value is going to be its definition. And if I were to squint real close at this, because the print here is real small, what does that definition say? A food made from roasted and ground cacao seeds, eaten as a candy or mixed with milk and water to make a drink. And that is the value of chocolate in this map. That is the definition. Now let's pick another word. Let's look for another fun one. I'm just flipping through random pages here. Island. Alright, that's a fun word. So we can say ds map add to the map island. What is that? A piece of land surrounded by water. Okay, let's do one more. I'm not going to waste too much time looking up words in a dictionary. Let's look for something slightly nerdy. How about vertex? Where's vertex? V-E-R. All the way at the end here, and I'm going to have to like weight down this page with something heavy. DS map add map vertex. What does that say? Each angular point on. Okay, so we've defined a few words in this here dictionary. We've defined a few words in this DS map. Now, if you wanted to do this process in reverse, if you wanted to look up a word in this dictionary, you could say ds map find value. The map is going to be map, so that's the one that we've been working with. The key is going to be the word that we want to look up. So let's look up the word island. This will return a value. We can show message ds map find value, the definition of island, and we can run the game now, and that is going to show us, assuming nothing goes horribly wrong, which it shouldn't, we're going to have a message box appearing that says a piece of land surrounded by water. Likewise, and I'm just gonna let me just game end at the end of that so I don't have to manually close the game myself. If you were to show message ds map find value something else, for example vertex, then we're going to have the definition of island followed by the definition of vertex. It is worth mentioning that these strings are case sensitive, so if you were to add a key to a DS map in the form of a string, it is going to be case sensitive. If you were to try and look up island with a capital I, we would see just an undefined value in the message box because the key does not exist. If you want to check first to see if a key does exist in a DS map, you have ds map exists, in which you can look up the map and you can look up the key that you want to look up. So let's say island with a capital I. And then you could say if, for example, if dsmap exists, show the definition. Else, maybe you want to show something more like, I have caps lock on. Maybe you want to inform the user that the key is not found in the map. Okay, so island with a capital I does not exist, whereas island with a lowercase I does exist. That's not the word that I wanted. Yeah, okay. Sland. That's a word that exists in our dictionary. Much better. What else is there? So you can change values in a dictionary. You can change values in a dsmap. So if we were to look up, for example, the word chocolate, and then perhaps we want to redefine the word chocolate, you could say dsmap, and there's a couple ways to do this. You can say dsmap replace, dsmap replace, and you can replace in the map the word chocolate with the best snack food ever, and then you could show the message containing the definition of the word chocolate again, and we're going to see that the value that we're fetching from this map changes. Okay, so that's what we got from the Oxford English Dictionary, whatever edition that I was using, and this is my my new definition, which is slightly more concise, and some might argue a more useful definition. You can also say dsmap set. And like dslists, there are multiple functions that you could use for changing the value of something in a dsmap, and I honestly do not know why. I believe if you also say dsmap add, it will do the same thing. So that is going to, okay, dsmap set and dsmap replace will do functionally the same thing. Dsmap add will not change the value associated with the key in a dsmap if it already exists. There was something similar going on with lists in that we had like ds list set and ds list replace, and as far as I'm concerned, they're the same thing. Somebody in the comments said something to the effect of they have slightly different behaviors under certain circumstances where the value doesn't already exist in a list, but I expect it's the same thing with dsmaps. You can, however, dsmap is a delete, dsmap delete, and you can remove a key from the dsmap. So you could say dsmap delete, our dictionary map, and we could delete the word chocolate. And if we were to, after doing that, if we were to dsmap find value of the word chocolate after we delete it from the map, we will see that it's not there. And all right, that's our dictionary definition. That is our undefined definition because we've removed it from the dictionary, and that is our new definition. Because the key is no longer in the dictionary, we can re-add it. Okay. It's worth mentioning that each key in dsmap, so each word in the dictionary, can only have one definition. That is not strictly true of the English language, but as far as maps and dictionaries and associative arrays in computer science are concerned, each key can only have a single value, but the same value can be used by multiple keys. So if we were to, for example, well, we've already seen what happens when we try to redefine a word. We replace its value instead of giving it a second value. But if we were to say dsmap add map, let's say, for example, rabbit, a small and fluffy hoppity creature. We could also say dsmap add map and bunny. And we could give it the exact same definition. I'm just going to copy and paste so there's no risk of me screwing it up. Bunny is a small and fluffy hoppity creature. And then I'm just going to delete all this. We could show message dsmap find value rabbit in our map. And then we could dsmap find value bunny. And we could also compare these two values. We could even go a step further and say if dsmap find value bunny is equal to dsmap find value rabbit, we can show message same definition, else different definition. And this is going to show us our dictionary definition of rabbit, followed by our dictionary definition of bunny, followed by, they have the same definition. So each individual key in a map can reference the same value. So there's a few other helpful DS map related functions. We can say DS map size, and that is going to tell us the number of keys in the DS map, the number of words in our dictionary. This is going to be 5. We have chocolate, island, vertex, bunny, and rabbit, so we have 5 keys in this map. So there is, unlike with arrays and DS lists, there is not a nice, neat way to iterate over the contents of a DS map in GameMaker. There are, however, ways that you can do it if you don't mind writing code that is sort of a little bit ugly. You can say, to start with DS map find first, and you can supply the DS map. This is going to return, and I'm just going to say this to a variable because I'll be coming back to it a bit. This is going to find the first key in the DS map, the first word in the dictionary. Worth noting that these keys in the dictionary are not going to be stored in the order that we added them. They're not going to be stored in alphabetical order. For all intents and purposes, they're going to be stored in a random order. Not truly random, of course. They're just going to be stored in whatever order that the hash function that GameMaker uses internally decides to put them in. This may or may not actually be the first word that we added. If we were to show message key, that is going to show us that the first word in the dictionary in the order that GameMaker is storing it, which happens to be island. Likewise, DS map find last will give you the last word that's stored in a dictionary, which again won't necessarily be bunny, but in this case I see it is. There is a 1 in 5 chance that it just happens to end up like that. And if you really want to iterate over a DS map, you can say DS map find next, which will take a DS map and the key that you want to find the next key that comes after, again in the pseudo random order that they're stored internally. You can say show message key. There's also DS map find previous if you want to go in the opposite order. And if I were to do this 5 times, because there are 5 words in this dictionary, 3, 4, 5, we will see that the order in which these words are stored is going to be island, and I'm not actually, hang on, wait, Dragonite, stop. Key equals DS map find next. Okay. Let's try that again. So we're going to have island, rabbit, vertex, chocolate, and bunny. Heh, chocolate bunny. And you can, of course, do this in a loop. You can use a while loop to find the to loop over a DS map. If you were to try and find whatever the DS map find next value after the last word in the map is, you'll just get undefined. So if I were to run this now, we're gonna have island, rabbit, vertex, chocolate, bunny, and undefined. So if you wanted to, you could say while key is not equal to undefined. You could just do this in a loop this way, and that will give us each of the words in this DS map in a loop. We're going to have island, rabbit, vertex, chocolate, and bunny, followed by undefined. The loop isn't going to terminate until after the last one is shown. You could also use the do until loop. I'm not a huge fan of the do until loop in GameMaker or the do while loop in general. You can use the for loop, so you can say for, and instead of saying I equals 0, I is less than 10, I plus plus, or something like that, you could say for var, let's say key equals DS map find first in the map. In the continuation condition, you could say key is not equal to undefined. And in the update condition, you could say key is going to equal DS map find next in the map with the existing key. And from here, you could say show message. You could say show message key, and do whatever other operations you want on that key. For example, you could say show message DS map find value in the map with the specified key. And that is going to give us each word with its definition. So island is a piece of land surrounded by water. Rabbit is a small and fluffy hoppity creature. Vertex is each angular point on a polygon, triangle, or other geometric figure. Chocolate is a food made from roasted and ground cacao seeds, eaten as a candy or mixed with milk and water to make a drink. And bunny is a small and fluffy hoppity creature. I am literally making a video that's just me reading from a dictionary. Anyway, with all that said, iterating over a DS map isn't really ideal. It's slightly slower than iterating over a DS list or over an array, although it's not really as slow as people sometimes make it out to be. Again, the keys are stored in a random order. They're not stored in the order that you added them to the map. They're not stored in any sort of alphabetical order. And if you need to be able to iterate over each key in a DS map, you probably might want to consider using something like a DS list or an array instead. You probably don't want to use a DS map if that is one of the things that you need to do with this data structure. That's not to say you'll never need to iterate over a DS map, but most of the time, if you need to do something like this, you would probably be better off using a list or an array. As a bit of a fun aside, in the ancient history versions of GameMaker, back in the days of like GameMaker 8, the keys in a DS map actually would be stored in alphabetical order. And the reason for that was that the data structure that GameMaker used internally to store the keys and values in a DS map was something else. They used a binary search tree back in the GameMaker 8 days rather than a hash map. And for those not familiar with binary search trees, which GameMaker, unfortunately, at least at the moment, does not currently make available as part of its standard library. One of the features of binary search trees is that the contents will be sorted by value. That's just something mildly interesting that you may not have known about a version of GameMaker that really hasn't been relevant in almost a decade now. Anyway, there's a few other things you can do with DS maps in GameMaker. I forget if I talked about this when I made the video about DS lists, but all of the data structures that begin with DS in GameMaker have functions that look like DS map write and DS map read, and it works for lists: DS list write, DS list read. Again, I can't remember if I mentioned this before. DS stack write, DS stack read, and as well as all the other ones. All the other data structures in GameMaker also have similar functions. I don't really recommend that you do this. These functions are very, very old. They're from the olden days, long before GameMaker had functions to do anything along the lines of, for example, reading or writing JSON. Speaking of which, if you want to write a DS map to JSON, we have JSON encode and JSON decode. There are a few other functions that are useful with DS maps which pertain to JSON. We have DS map add map, DS map add list. This is a little bit beyond the scope of this video. And like several other things that I've mentioned in this video, including but not limited to DS maps themselves, these functions are somewhat on the obsolete side, and you probably don't really have to use them. There are better functions to use in most cases. There's also the slightly infamous DS map secure save and DS map secure load. Where are they? Here. These functions, I say, are infamous. Some people have some funny ideas about what you can use these for. Some people who have written games that try to do things such as in-app purchases with stored credit card information have tried to use these functions. Please do not do that. What these functions actually do is honestly rather convoluted and honestly probably not like a major benefit to the functionality of GameMaker. The short version is that this will create a save file that's tied to the device that you're currently using. That does not mean these are cryptographically secure, and please do not use them to store credit card information. That is a terrible idea. Anyway, if you do not feel like typing out dsmap add, dsmap set, dsmap find value constantly, there is a shorter way of accessing the information stored in dsmap. So if I were to show message dsmap find value bunny, that would tell us a small and fluffy hoppity creature. I don't really need to run this code again. If you don't feel like typing this out over and over again, just like the way that lists have an accessor, DS maps also have an accessor. You can use array notation like square brackets followed by a question mark, and that will tell GameMaker that we are intending to use the structure as a DS map. And this will allow us to easily look up or store a value inside a DS map. So we can see map question mark bunny is going to be a small and fluffy hoppity creature. And it also works the other way. It also works for writing values to the map. So you could say, instead of saying dsmap add or dsmap set, you could say just map question mark bunny is going to equal that in a similar way to an array or a DS list, and we can see that it still works. Accessors were added to GameMaker for lists, grids, and maps in GameMaker Studio 1. They are possibly one of the best additions to GML in prior to the 2.3 update. Actually, you know what? What am I talking about? No, that honor goes to shaders. Data structure accessors can take second place, though. I am being very weird in this video. So I said at the beginning that DS maps are honestly in a lot of ways obsolete, and they are honestly in a lot of ways not very useful for a lot of things anymore. And that is because starting with GameMaker 2.3, we got access to structs. And structs in a lot of ways, are really just better versions of DS maps. They don't have to be explicitly destroyed when you're done using them, so you don't have to worry about memory leaks when it comes to structs. You could use the dot operator on them. You could essentially use them as proto lightweight objects, and you could say things like map dot chocolate and map dot island is going to equal that definition, and map dot vertex is going to equal that definition. You could also access the keys inside them. Instead of using the dot operator like this, you could access them with a string with an accessor of their own. This was introduced in GameMaker Studio 2.3.1, so the first major update after 2.3. And doing this would look very much identical to the question mark accessor notation of DS maps. But instead of using the question mark, it would be a $sign. And likewise, you could say show message, either map dot, let's say vertex, or show message map square bracket rather, $, something else, bunny. If you wanted to be able to look up a random key in a map that wasn't known at compile time. And that's going to give us the definition of a vertex, and that is going to give us next the definition of a bunny. And an awful lot of the functionality that you could use with DS maps has a re-implementation of sorts and structs. Only a few things don't. I'm not going to get into what all of that is right now. Last year, when 2.3.1 initially dropped, I made a video on how you might start to use structs for most things in your game instead of DS maps. And I will have a link to that on screen right now if you want to go see it. I believe the only situations nowadays in which you would have to use a DS map over a struct would be for certain asynchronous events in GameMaker, because those make use of certain special DS maps, depending on the specifics of the async event in question. But that is a story for another day. I said this would be a short video. I have a feeling this is not going to end up being a short video. I hope you found this useful, or at least I hope you found this interesting. Again, DS maps don't see a lot of use in modern versions of GameMaker, but since they are still part of the language, I do still want to make videos covering them. No code this time. I will not have any GitHub links in the video description this time around, but I do still try to post about 2 game dev videos a week, one tutorial like this one, and one Let's Make a Tower Defense game. I have a Patreon, so if you want to contribute towards those videos being made, there will be links to that in all the usual places as well. You could see your name in the credits, hear yourself shouted out at the end, get a preview of my future plans, all that fun stuff. Otherwise, I hope you all enjoyed that, and I will see you all later. By the way, and I almost forgot to mention this, I'm not saying this is something you should necessarily do, but the keys that you add to a DS map don't have to be strings. They could be any data type you want. They could be a number, so we could say 1, 0, 1, 2, and so on. And then we could look up inside a DS map, we could say either DS map find value or use the map accessor and look up the value stored associated with key 0. And this will give us the definition of chocolate, because we have changed the key that the definition of chocolate is associated to 0. You could use other data types. You could use even arrays if you wanted to. And this is a terrible idea, but I'm going to do it anyway just to show that it works. I'm gonna create myself an array. I'm gonna call it R, and we can just give this a string of its own. It can just contain a single string. Actually, you know what? It can contain each of these in its own string, like this. And if we wanted to, we could add a food made from roasted and ground cacao seeds to the map with the key of array. And then when we look it up, we could look up the array in the DS map. This is a terrible idea. You shouldn't do it, but it will work. You could even use pointers. So if you have a pointer, if you have something like a buffer, we can say buffer create with a size of 10, buffer fixed, alignment of 1. Fixed, I said. You could use the buffer get address of the buffer. You could add the definition of chocolate to the DS map using that. And then if we try to look up that in the DS map later, we're still gonna get the answer. You can also do the same thing for any of the other data types in GameMaker. I am not saying you should do this, but you can if you want to. There may or may not be situations in which doing this can actually be helpful. I will not be disclosing further details for the safety of the code bases of everybody involved. Also, I suppose for what it's worth, this is not something that you're allowed to do with structs. This is something that you can actually only do with maps, and honestly, that may be for the better. I will see you all later. Special thanks to Connor, Edward Holt, Emily Koyo, Halo Factory, Posho, Sindra Larson, Tusk, and Zenith for supporting these videos. If you want to see your name in the credits or hear yourself shouted out at the end, head on over to the Patreon page down in the video description to join the fun.